We will now undergo a round of 5-minute questions. Ambassador Leaf, let me first talk to you about day after planning in Gaza. The FY25 request largely maintains recent funding levels for the West Bank and Gaza, despite the fact that we know we have a huge bill ahead of us. But we can't spend money effectively in Gaza if we don't have a governance structure that keeps Israel safe and understands political realities on the ground in Gaza. My understanding is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has essentially refused to start post-war planning in Gaza, not because he doesn't believe it is important to do so, but because he has pressure from his far-right coalition partners who want to reoccupy Gaza with Jewish settlements. So can you just talk for a moment about the status of planning for what the governance structure looks like once this conflict comes to a close, because we are keeping our fingers crossed that with or without an agreement, we are potentially weeks, maybe a month or two away from the formal military operations coming to a close. And it is just extraordinary that we have no viable plan from the Israeli government as to what comes next.
Senator, this question of what comes next, what comes after this conflict, is one that we have discussed extensively with our Arab partners, with the Palestinians, with the Israeli government over the course of the last 4 or 5 months. And you're right, there is still insufficient planning, to say the least, on the part of the Israeli government. I would say, however, that has not kept us from doing the work on our side and consulting extensively, and also drawing up some concepts that, as Secretary Blinken said last week, we will be prepared to share with partners here shortly. I just got back on Thursday from the trip that the Secretary took to Cairo, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Amman, and Doha. And I will probably leave again this weekend to continue those discussions and to drill in deeper. But suffice to say, there are some essential points of agreement notwithstanding. And that is that everyone is joined by the resolve to see Hamas removed from a governance role, and a governance role in particular at the point of a gun. Now, how we get there is going to be exceptionally difficult, and in no small part because of the conditions that prevail now in Gaza. But we are discussing this with our partners and looking at a variety of different concepts. I don't really want to go into those details in this public setting because, as you can imagine, it's all pretty sensitive. These get to the heart of politics for every one of these governments and for the Palestinians and the Israelis as well. But I think reality has a way of pushing even those who can't imagine a concept such as the PA returning to Gaza. Reality has a way of intruding, and I think, as the Secretary frequently says, you can't beat something without something as an alternative for Palestinians.
Let me just, I understand the sensitivity about discussing particular plans. Let me just share a skepticism with you. There are lots of smart people in the foreign policy consensus in this town who believe that there is going to be an Arab force, an Arab-funded force. I worry that greatly misunderstands the risk tolerance of our Arab friends. That certainly, in your head or on paper, makes all sorts of sense for the Saudis and the Emiratis, others to either populate or front a governance structure or a security force. They have never been willing to take a chance that big, and it probably overestimates how much they care about the future of the Palestinian people.
I would just say we're intimately acquainted with their thinking on all of this. And so I would say there is no magical thinking on the part of this administration. We're well aware of how tough a piece this is, because we have to remind ourselves this has been a piece of territory run, ruled, governed, if you will, at the point of a gun for 17 years by a foreign terrorist organization. That is not easy to deconstruct, and we've obviously made the point publicly and privately that you can't do it all by military means alone. There will have to be a political alternative, and that's what we're in the process of putting together, these concepts.
Ms. Pryor, I'm at the end of questions, but just say a word about the consequences of another year of a prohibition on U.S. funding for UNRWA. most all countries, almost without exception, that had temporarily turned off funding for UNRWA as the investigation was ongoing have started that funding again. And I just don't understand how these fragile places like Jordan and Lebanon and Syria survive if UNRWA has only 2 months of funding at any given time without the United States playing a role and without, frankly, a lot of our Gulf allies stepping up and filling the vacuum.
Thank you for that question. USAID does not fund UNRWA. However, we are looking, especially in places like Jordan or Lebanon, in which you do have refugee populations dependent upon UNRWA, on how we can better use our own assistance to help mitigate that impact. In both Jordan and Lebanon, we do a lot of work with host communities, which also has the added benefit of helping refugee populations as well. So we will take a look and see what is it that we can do from our side, given that we don't fund UNRWA, to help soften the blow of the loss of our funding.
Right, but you are a partner, but you are partners with all sorts of organizations that do work with UNRWA. You are in the same business. You must have a view as to the seriousness about UNRWA working on a budget right now that doesn't have enough cash flow to last more than 60 days.
Yes, it is very concerning because this is not something we were able to budget for to be able to compensate for that.
You can't fill in. USAID cannot fill in for the gap that has been created.
It would be extremely difficult for us to do that with the resources that we have.
Thank you, Senator Young.